Welcome to The Plunge with Derek Holzer. Today's episode is a unique one, a different one, and might take some people by surprise. I am having a conversation with Joel Miller about Cormac McCarthy's novel, Child of God. This is not a series. This is a one-off episode discussing a book that left a deep impression in my life. You might ask yourselves, if you're familiar with this book, how on earth, Derek, did you choose this book? And you'll see that Joel asks the same question. I can't explain it. The answer to that question is a mystery even to me. There's something about McCarthy's prose that everyone knows is extraordinary. Whether you find it exquisite or revolting, Cormac McCarthy has the capacity and the ability to somehow instantly communicate what is happening in his scenes, with his characters, and put you in their shoes in a way that I have seldom encountered by any other writer, living or dead. And so, as you'll discover in this episode, that there's a pivotal statement that happens in the opening pages that captured me and compelled me to continue to read. For those of you who are unfamiliar, this conversation navigates it delicately. We do not speak in graphic or explicit terms, and yet if you do decide that you would like to read Child of God, understand that it is a very graphic novel with very dark themes, as dark as perhaps exist. I'll read the quick overview for those of you who are unfamiliar with Cormac McCarthy's Child of God. Child of God is a 1973 novel by American author Cormac McCarthy, a chilling and dark story about Lester Ballard, a violent, dispossessed outcast in 1960s Appalachian Tennessee, who descends into depravity and crime. It's known for its stark depiction of the sordid aspects of life. The novel was praised for its lyrical prose and analysis of isolation and humanity, though it was not a financial success. It is grotesque, it is at times horrific, and at times darkly comedic. Nonetheless, throughout, the question lingers in my mind as to the humanity and depravity of Lester Ballard, the main character. And the question resonates in my heart that no matter what a person does, no matter what a person has experienced, they remain a child of God, much like me, perhaps. Joel Miller.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining me.
Totally. Thanks for having me.
How you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic.
Good. Thank you for being willing to dive into this crazy-ass novel.
Yeah, it is a crazy-ass novel. Thanks for asking me to reread it. I haven't read it in years, and when you asked me, I was like, what a strange choice. I'd love to reread that. So,
oh, good. Yeah. Well, I'm a strange man, so I make strange choices. Before we dive into Cormac McCarthy, Child of God, I'm just curious if you'd share a little bit about your life story. How did you end up where you're at today, and what do you do now?
Well, I work for Full Focus, which is a company that focuses on helping people get what we call the double win, which is winning at work and succeeding at life. And so we create the Full Focus Planner, which enables people to identify their sort of the key priorities in their life and pursue them on a daily basis in a way that they add up to a life well lived. And that is, like the primary thing I'm spending, most of my days on. The background of that, though, was I came into the company as an editor, and I've been an editor for quite a while. We first met, in fact, when I was an editor at Thomas Nelson. Yeah. And I have been in that kind of world for now, really since the late 1990s. So my entire professional life, I've been in the editorial side of things in various places, many years at Thomas Nelson, just over a decade there. And I have, just had a lifelong love of literature and of what words can do to persuade people, to move people, to craft arguments, to tell stories. And I mean, I guess that's the rough answer,
Yeah.
Just the power of words has always been something that has moved me.
And you've been in the Nashville area for 20 years plus?
Yes, I moved here from Oregon in 2003.
Okay.
I actually grew up in Northern California in a little town called, well, it's not little any longer, Roseville, and then in a littler town, also not little any longer, called Lincoln. And then I moved up to Grants Pass, Oregon, spent some time in Medford, and then moved from there to Nashville.
Okay. So I live just a few hours north.
North, yeah.
of where you grew up.
Yeah.
Yeah, beautiful country.
It is. I get back there on visits, and I'm always just kind of swept up in the feeling of, like, instantly memories from my childhood.
Yeah.
Just being among, the dry atmosphere and the trees and the whole thing.
So beautiful. So, and I want to thank you again. You've been kind and encouraging to me in my aspiring writer journey.
Yeah.
And
you've borne fruit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's all because of your cultivation.
I don't know about that. It's all because of your skill.
Yeah. Well, when we first met a dozen or so years ago, as you say, you were editor and working at Thomas Nelson.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate the fact that you bring to the conversation today that background, a tremendous depth of experience in reading people attempting to communicate.
Yeah.
And providing guidance, constructive criticism, feedback, all those things. Since are obviously very well read as a consequence of your employment, but also your own passion.
Yeah.
Is there an author, before we get into Cormac McCarthy, that kind of just continually surprises you or impresses you?
There's so many. It kind of depends on the area. I read widely and I read a lot. So every year I probably read into the 80s in terms of books. Sometimes they are big, sometimes they're little, sometimes they're prose, nonfiction, sometimes they're fiction. A good mix of probably all of the above. In terms of subject matter, it's everything from history to theology to classic novels, some contemporary novels, just depending on who the author is. One of those authors that does surprise me, and I read every book he publishes, is a Russian novelist named Eugene Vodolazkin. He is a constant surprise. Every novel is different, and every one of them is surprising and deep in ways that just keep you riveted and guessing and surprised, at every turn. He wrote a book that was reviewed in the New Yorker called Laurus, and that was kind of his first big break. When the New Yorker read that, it spread, the news of this guy far and wide, and Rod Dreher read that review and instantly became kind of a champion for that book. I found out about it through the New Yorker article, and then I read Rod Dreher's article about it right after that, and I thought, I got to get this book. I got that book and was utterly captivated and surprised. It is a strange novel in that it's a representation of what in the Russian Orthodox tradition would be called or considered a holy fool, and kind of his life story as he moves from one phase of his life to the next. And it bends time in a few interesting ways. It is a deep story of repentance, and it's not one that you would ever expect would go the way it goes. It's like it keeps you guessing the entire way. And then he published a book a couple years after that called The Aviator.
Oh, I've heard of that one.
And that also turned out to be a book about repentance. If I could tell anybody that was interested in books on repentance, as odd as that sounds, those two novels would be some of the most riveting. And that book involves a man who was part of he grew up just as the Bolsheviks took over in Russia, and he wakes up. You find out that backstory later. He wakes up in the present day, basically, having been asleep for like 100 years, and he's been asleep, cryogenically frozen. He ended up participating in an experiment where the Russians were trying to figure out how to do this with people. And he was a prisoner because he was kind of on the outs with the new regime. And as a prisoner, he ended up being selected, to participate in this experiment. And so what happens in the novel is he wakes up in the future, he wakes up today, and he's slowly but surely gaining his memories back as he's journaling. And that is the structure of the novel.
Okay.
With exchanges with his doctor, with eventually the woman that he marries, who is the granddaughter of a woman he was interested in years before. And it turns out he has something to repent for. And he's in a sense been kept alive all this time to give him the opportunity to repent.
Wow.
And it's a fascinating, riveting story. Cool. And so anything Vodoloskin does, I'm going to jump on it.
And does he write in Russian and then someone translates?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yeah,
Lisa Hayden has published or has translated most of his novels. He wrote another one for, let's see, it's called Brisbane, and there was another translator on that one. But most of his novels have been translated by a woman named Lisa Hayden.
Very cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to check him out. I have not yet encountered his work.
He's astonishing.
Yeah. Well, to another astonishing writer.
My goodness.
Cormac
yes.
McCarthy. So when we were corresponding about this, and all of them kind of react the same way as you did. Like, this book? Are you sure?
Are you sure? Right, yeah.
And
you have read it, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And the reason why I have probably recommended it only a handful of times.
Yeah.
Because of how intense and dark the content is.
Yeah.
But when I do, it's to people who are really captivated and not intimidated or afraid to explore the entirety of the human condition.
Yeah.
And the reason that I chose this is because I'll just read the line, and I still, it's probably been a decade since I first read this book.
Yep. About the same for me.
Yeah, it was written the year I was born, so it's over 50 years old. And the prose, I mean, Cormac is just phenomenal. But here's the section. It's page 4. We're just in it. The setting of the scene is they're auctioning off this character's family farm. His name is Lester Ballard, and he is described as a ne'er-do-well, a troublemaker. He all the descriptions are, this is not a guy you want to hang out with.
Yeah.
And it says, to watch these things issuing from the otherwise mute pastoral morning is a man at the barn door. He is small, unclean, unshaven. He moves in the dry chaff among the dust and slats of sunlight with a constrained truculence, Saxon and Celtic bloods. A child of God, much like yourself, perhaps.
Yeah.
And when I read that line, I froze. A child of God, much like yourself, perhaps. Whatever it was that you were portraying and imagining this person to be, he's human, as you are.
So before we jump into that line in particular, the way he describes the scene itself, like standing between the slats of light, you can instantly see what that's like. You've been at a barn before where the boards don't join any longer. It's really old, and you can see the sunlight passing through the gaps, and he's standing there, and it's like with very spare description, he can evoke an entire scene and put you right in the middle of it again and again and again. So this is a spare book. I mean, we're only talking about, not even quite 200 pages. Yeah. And yet the level of description, while it's so compact, is also so full. It's astonishing.
It really is.
But that word, perhaps, I have a note underlining that very word. To me, that's the whole story. The whole drama is in the word perhaps, because you quickly find out he is either like you or he's not like you. And it all hinges on this perhaps, and every despicable thing that comes next is like loaded into that word perhaps. Yeah. The whole story is loaded into those few letters.
Yeah. Before we get into the details of the book, first, when did you first encounter McCarthy? What did you first read of his?
The first book I read of his was The Road.
Okay.
Actually, that's wrong. Sorry.
That's okay.
The first book I read of his was All the Pretty Horses. Which was, is a arrestingly beautiful novel. It's like this, although in a much different scene with much different types of characters. The way he evokes landscape and just the feeling of a place is utterly astonishing. You feel like you are in the West. You feel like you are in Mexico. You feel like you are in the environment that he's depicting in ways that feel utterly immersive. And I find his skill at that breathtaking.
Incomparable,
almost.
perhaps?
Incomparable, yeah. I mean, various authors do it in various ways, but like it would be really difficult to find somebody that does it the way that he does it. And that novel just like astonished me. I remember like nearly weeping at the end of that novel. And it's also a gritty tale. I mean, like it's rough, but it's not excessively violent or gruesome or things like that. It's just stark, in its depiction of what happens as people run up against the rough edges of their decisions. In that book, it's fundamentally about setting something in motion that cannot be undone and what happens to the lives of these characters as they grapple with their consequences. And that book is also deeply theological in the sense that it's fundamentally about providence and fate. And like, how, again, like there's a teeter-totter kind of moments in the book where it's about which of those two is the truest, in certain ways at least. So I read that and I thought, this is incredible. I have to read more by Cormac McCarthy. So I read The Road right after that. And I was going through an interesting time in my life at that point. I had been married and was divorced. And I was kind of like reconstituting my sense of self by reading a lot of fiction at the time. And I read, all kinds of everybody. But Cormac McCarthy had come up. And so I just read All the Pretty Horses. And so then I thought, well, I'll read The Road next, which had kind of been out for a couple years, I guess, at that point. Oprah had, put it in her book club of all things. And
Interesting.
Probably the only time I think a post-apocalyptic novel of that kind of grimness ended up in her book club, but it did. And I just happened to see a copy, I guess, at a book table someplace, and I grabbed it. And I mean, I underline a lot of what I read, a lot of marginalia. When I went through this most recently, I didn't. I just had a handful of notes. But with The Road, I was underlining quotes just all through it. And I remember particularly a passage that sticks with me to this day where the setup for the story is a father and son in this post-apocalyptic world where some grievous thing has happened and all of society has utterly caved in upon itself. There is no governing authority of any kind outside of if you are in number more than somebody else, in force, more aggressive than somebody else, you have a comparative advantage. Because everything is broken down, there's not like the ability to gather food any longer. People are like eating each other. It's like utterly grim. It's so grim. There's just not even words to describe it. But there's a moment where the father talks to the son, who he's trying to help navigate this kid out of this environment to someplace that is just marginally better. And the whole point of the book is this relationship between the father and the son, this very protective father and this son who has to trust his dad totally with his entire life. And there's a moment where the father says to the son that there are good guys out there. Everybody they encounter, and they try to encounter nobody, is bad. And yet there must be good guys out there, the father tells him. And there's a scene where they reject helping somebody because the father doesn't think it's safe. And the kid confronts him with it later, and he says, I thought you said that there were good people out there, because the father was saying, like, we can't help this guy. And the kid's like, I thought you said that there were good people out there. And the father says, there are. And then the kid's like, well, then where are they? And he says, they're hiding from each other.
Wow.
And I remember reading that at the time. I still think about that line to this day. And I think of all the things I've ever read that have encouraged me to trust people, or have encouraged me to just be vulnerable, it's that I don't want to be a good person hiding from other good people.
Yeah.
I would rather just be wrong and be taken advantage of, or be wrong and have somebody injure me some way, than to hide.
Yeah.
And that line has stuck with me all the way down. So I read that, and then I read Blood Meridian, which that is
gruesome.
That is gruesome and dark. Amazing. Yeah. I mean, the descriptions of the environment are like utterly unlike anything. Yeah. Incredibly beautiful. And then after Blood Meridian, I read Child of God. And that's what made me think, are you nuts asking me to talk about this? Because it is a demented, strange tale. Yes. And I remember reading it at the time just going, what is happening? But because it is, I mean, every one of those other books, except for The Road is fairly short. The other ones are considerably longer. This one is so brief. And I think it would be a crime against the reader to have made it longer. Yeah. This book is so brief that as you're reading through it, you kind of like lunge from each descent of this character to the next, right. And then all of a sudden you're finished. And there's a lot left to think about, but he doesn't linger on anything. And so even though it's a book that if somebody had asked you, like, hey, would you just like to talk about this particularly strange man who did these very, gruesome things, you'd be like, I think I'd rather talk about something else. Mm-hmm. You really can't stop as you're reading the book. Yeah. It pulls you in, and, you have free will. You could put the book down, but you don't want to. No. You just got to see what happens with this guy.
Yes.
And, there are things about him that are weirdly humorous. Mm-hmm. There are things about him that are very kind of sympathetic, and I should actually say pathetic. Yeah. He's very pathetic. And because of that patheticness, there's parts of you that just wants to see what happens to him, even when he's busy doing things that, you're like, oh goodness, I need to look away. You just now you got to know what happens next. Yeah. And he does, Cormac McCarthy does just enough of the kind of save the cat sympathy making for him at the beginning of the book that you really do want to see where he goes, even when you long since when that sympathy has blown off the truck 5 miles ago, right. you still just have to see.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because, as you say, for me, it's the same experience. Reading McCarthy is you want to look away, but it's exquisite the way that he writes.
Yeah.
And as I read it, I have a simultaneous experience of the story, tracking the story, what's going to happen, and also, my gosh, that sentence.
Right.
Wow. How?
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Just an extraordinary writer.
How did he put those particular words together that particular way?
Yeah.
Especially since some of those words, you'll encounter this if you pick up any Cormac McCarthy book. He creates like these compound nouns.
Yes.
And the minute you read it, you're like, well, that word's been in the English language all along, right?
Right.
No, it hasn't. He coined it,
yeah.
or he was the one who took that very odd adjective and attached it to that noun to create this new compound, which he joins together without a hyphen.
Right.
So and he'll give you like 3 or 4 of those in a row, basically, and you're just like stunned. It's like a guy jumping from one log to another when you're like, well, you can't do that. Like that's not enough room, right? Or whatever. Right, and you're like, how did he not lose his balance? How did he make it to the end with a period? You know?
Yeah. And speaking of periods, his incredibly sparse use of punctuation.
Right.
Including, I don't know there's another writer I've read that doesn't use quotation marks
for
dialogue.
Yeah, none. So you have this weird experience sometimes of where you're reading what is a quote from someone, and you're not quite sure if it's a quote from someone. It forces you to read closely. It forces you to pay attention. And then there are those moments where you realize that you've just been swept along by that. You don't even notice anymore.
Totally.
He doesn't use apostrophes for most of his contractions. You never think about it. No. You just go along, and it's like the phonetic resonance that the word has just ends up in your ear as you're reading it, and you just know. Like in here, where a character will say "can't," they say "can't," and their "can't" CAINT is just one word. There's no apostrophe in there. There's no explanation of that extra vowel. It's just that's how they talk, it's just there.
Yeah, it reminds me of how Stephen King does dialogue. I recall one of his books. He wrote it was a Boston dialect, and the character was talking about the Catholic Church.
Right.
But it was cat, C-A-T-L-I-C-K, Catholic.
Catholic, yeah.
And but McCarthy does, I was just noticing as well, with so many words. These characters are in Tennessee.
Yep.
In the 1950s, I believe, 40s, 50s. And instead of every, it's ever.
Yeah, yep.
Like ever tree.
Yep.
Right? Not every tree. Anyway, so many of those.
All through, there's that kind of Appalachian dialect that he's using.
Yeah.
And as you're reading it, you just kind of get in the rhythm of it.
Yeah.
Even like his fragments where he doesn't give you the verb. He doesn't need to. He gives you like this little punchy thing, and you just read it and you just get caught up in it, and it does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
And it's very efficient, but at the same time it feels like it was all the words that you needed to make that scene work the way that it needed to work.
Right. And I want to get into the text, but recently there's been, in terms of McCarthy's personal life, revelations about infidelity with a younger woman. And I'm just curious, particularly in our culture today, with respect to artists and their art, and the personal life and what they produce, and how we respond to that. Should we? I don't know. Any thoughts that you might have on that?
Yeah, so this was the revelation in, I think it was Vanity Fair, big article about an underage woman that he had had a relationship with for a long time.
Yeah.
Long after she became of a legal age, but started before, and even to the extent where it could have been that he had groomed her. Not utterly clear that was the case. She seems to have been consenting, but then of course that's why the laws exist, because can a minor really consent, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, like not an acceptable thing at all. I think the hard thing about cases like this when it comes to artists and their art is there is a distinction between the work product of a human and that particular human. And I don't say that dismissively, Roald Dahl was a famous anti-Semite. I still love Roald Dahl's children's stories and read them to my kids. I would never stop reading them, even if he were still alive today, saying the things that he was saying. I would use that actually as a way to say it's a shame that something this brilliant could have been written by somebody like this, and I would hope he would change. And I would use that instructionally if I could with my kids. With myself, I just put the separation between those two things, the art and the artist, the work product and the worker, and just say basically it's not my job to judge this person. I'm happy to have an opinion about it. In this case, that reprehensible. But there's something of integrity in the work itself that kind of still demands attention, and I'd still read it for sure and still recommend it and all of those things.
Yeah. Thank you for addressing that.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about those.
There are some significant issues there in play, but I think they're navigable. And Eric Matthews is a philosopher who wrote a book called Drawing the Line, which is a play off of a line from G.K. Chesterton, in which he's describing where we draw the line on morality, and particularly around problematic artists. the discovery about Woody Allen's indiscretions, or Louis C.K., or you go down the list, every rock band that ever existed, there's problems there. And yet, Woody Allen still wrote some of the most brilliant comedic dialogue ever written. And you'd be depriving yourself of not only the entertainment of those, but even just the exemplar of good art if you cut yourself off from those. Yeah. And there's ways of navigating questions of like, well, your money is going to support somebody like that, for instance, or you are throwing your lot in behind them if you are supporting their art. There's ways of addressing that, but I think at the end of the day, it comes down to an individual's conscience and what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask you, how does McCarthy's writing work to make Lester Ballard, who's the main character in this, a simultaneously, at least these are my words, so if you disagree, you can push back, reprehensible, but also pitiable character?
Well, I would answer that by saying at the beginning of the book, he is deprived of his ancestral home. And not only is he deprived of his ancestral home, because he really can't manage his temper well, he ends up getting the stuffing beaten out of him by the people present at this auction where they're auctioning off the family farm. And, there's a line in the chapter immediately after that where it says, like, Lester could never hold his head right after that, because he got beaten so badly. Yes. And there's a part of you that instantly feels...
Because he thought his neck had been thawed out.
That's
the prose of McCarthy.
Totally. There's a part of you that instantly feels compassion for this man who's been deprived of his property, however reasonable that was. And you'll get, as you read more about him, you're like, well, no wonder. Like, nobody like that could ever keep a piece of property, but you, through these kind of moments where he shows how other people have harmed him, you just out of solidarity, you kind of feel the need to have some sympathy for him. It's like a save the cat moment, instead of being a save the cat moment where this guy does something good and heroic. It's people do something so harmful to him that you kind of feel some, just your heart goes out to him to some degree or another.
Yeah.
And Cormac McCarthy is careful enough to create this guy in such a way that you're going to keep some of your heart for yourself, because he's not likable. He's not. Right. But he also is at the same time a little likable, or a little, at least a little relatable. And so you end up with that moment where you're like, you kind of go out to him like, oh man, I can't believe they're treating him like that. And at the same time, like, he had it coming.
Yeah. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like a few chapters in, we learn that in addition to that scene at the opening, Lester's father hung himself.
Yes.
And so at some point, that's how it ended up that the farm was lost to the bank or whomever is auctioned. That's the impression I got. Does that seem correct?
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting about McCarthy's narrative style is he leaves a lot of things ambiguous. Part of it is there's no need to explain certain things, and so he lets things just we'll get there, but there's a scene where
we can just go there.
Yeah, where McCarthy comes upon these two dead bodies in a automobile that's still running, and you're like, how did they die? Right. He doesn't bother to tell you. But what's funny about that is everything turns on that moment.
Yeah.
And so he just leaves it open. Yeah. And there's several moments in the story like that where things are just kind of left unsaid or not addressed. And they don't need to be. You're free to puzzle on them if you want, but the novel's like running away and you have to hurry up and catch up to it, Yeah. So you're not going to spend a lot of time lingering on the question. You got to get on with what's happening. Right. And that's a good example. So he gives you these moments where something traumatic has happened to Lester Ballard. For instance, the beating at the beginning or the suicide of his father. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really dwell on it, but you're suddenly left with realizing this is a traumatized person.
Yes.
Then at the same time, you're also left with moments like, for instance, when he's a child and he bullies another kid.
Yes.
A baseball gets, thrown over,
Yes.
down a ditch, and he tells this kid to go get it, and the kid refuses. I didn't lose the ball. Why should I have to go get it? And Ballard says basically, like, if you don't go get it, I'm going to punch you in the mouth.
Right.
And the kid stands up for himself.
Yes.
And Ballard hauls off and punches him in the face.
Yep.
And you instantly have that moment where you're like, well, I've just lost some respect for this guy. Not that you had much to begin with, but you realize he's a bully. And there's one of the other interesting things about the narrative style of this book is it's told in third person, and yet he also drops in these random voices from the community.
Yes.
Like these townsfolk who knew him growing up. And one of those characters narrates this particular episode and says at the end of it, like, I didn't want to have anything to do with him after that.
Well, I wanted to share that because as you're explaining how that unfolds, it's also how McCarthy always reserves just a little bit of, a lot actually, of not judging what's going on.
No, yeah.
Lester punches the Finney boy, and it was his, somebody give him a kerchief, and he put it to his nose. It was all swole up and bleeding. The Finney boy just looked at Lester Ballard and went on up the road. I felt, I don't know what it was. We just felt real bad. I never liked Lester Ballard from that day. I never liked him much before that. And then he finishes, he never done nothing to me.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't like him, but, he never did anything. It's just this back and forth, always ambiguous. Anyway.
Yeah, one of the things that's great about that is he never does anything judgmental with this guy through the entire thing. It's almost like he's reporting the facts.
Yeah.
And he leaves you, again, it's that moment at the beginning, a child of God, just like yourself, perhaps. He puts everything into that word perhaps, and then he just tells you the facts, so you're left wondering, is he like me? Is he not like me? He never comes down and judges him. So you're the one who has to judge Lester Ballard, and as the reader. And of course, you are going to come down in a certain way on it, but there's going to be a part of you that's going to wonder, like, how much am I like Lester Ballard? Or how much is he different than me? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And how much of whatever good that I have, that I think of myself, does he still have somewhere in him?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. In Athanasius's On the Incarnation, he talks about the image of God being like an image on an icon having been damaged. And there's a way of thinking about human nature where that icon has been completely effaced, and there's nothing about us that has any continuing reflective properties of God in us. Mm-hmm. And Athanasius would deny that was the case. He would say it's not been completely effaced. It's still there. Mm-hmm. It's just damaged. Mm-hmm. And then the question, like with a character like Ballard, is how damaged is too far having been damaged, or is there still something redemptive there, redeemable there? Mm-hmm. That's a real interesting question.
Yeah, and to your point about the novelist Eugene
Vodolazkin.
Vodolazkin, right, about repentance.
Yeah.
If perhaps at some page after this book is closed, Lester Ballard comes to his senses, as it were.
Yep.
Is it possible to be repaired and restored?
Yeah, I think, I won't even try to answer that because it's too interesting and it would take us far afield. But
oh, okay. Another question. This is so much fun for me. I hope you're enjoying yourself.
Oh, absolutely. This is a total treat.
Good. What does the novel suggest about the nature of violence and its role in human existence?
The novel suggests that violence is endemic to the human experience. Whether it's Ballard and his extreme forms of violence, or it is the community and their willingness to kind of like discipline him or ostracize him or lynch him eventually. And by the way, that eventually is, I should put in scare quotes because you'll have to get there and figure out what happens. But, Not a spoiler.
No.
Yeah.
It's okay. That we can use spoilers.
Okay, all right. I should have asked you that up front.
It's like Nate Bargatze's bit about watching the movie The Sixth Sense.
Yes.
I don't know if you've seen that. He's
Yeah.
like, spoiler alert, forget the spoilers. It's been out 20 years. Don't
Right.
tell me you were going to go watch it tonight. Anyway, this book's been out 50 years.
It's been out a while. You can, it's a very good point. Okay, so we may just get into a lot of spoilers. The community itself has to uphold its laws, and it uses violence to do that. And so violence is endemic to the human experience. There's no way around it. What is interesting is what is acceptable violence, what is not acceptable violence, what is, for instance, when Ballard gets beaten at the beginning, he's being restrained by law enforcement. And there's a sense in which that was inevitable. He's threatening somebody. He's going to have to be taken care of.
He has a gun.
Right.
In that scene.
Yeah. Did they have to beat him the way that they beat him so that his head never sat right,
Right.
Afterwards? That's an open question. So there's there's an endemic quality to violence in the human experience, but it does not mean that it is always right or ever good even. I think you could say that just because things are inevitable or part of the way things are made does not mean that they're good. And I think violence and the way McCarthy treats it here and in, frankly, all of his other novels, because violence is a recurring theme in every one of his novels, basically. The question of whether or not that is good is a different matter. And you kind of have to treat it like I'm going to almost like a moralist look at it in this moment, in this scene by scene, and just ask, is it okay in this scene? Is it not okay in this scene? There's a lot not okay in this one.
Yeah. It's interesting that McCarthy, I've not read his entire corpus.
I should say neither have I.
Yeah, but a good handful of his books, and I don't see any. It's similar to this experience in that he is just reporting, and observing dispassionately, and yet the writing is so alive and so vivid.
Yeah,
it almost makes me wonder about his own psyche. How can you be coldly detached in any way from interjecting your humanity into what's going on, and yet bring it so richly to life? It's fascinating.
It is. James Franco did a movie of Child of God, and again, you're like, who would do that?
I love James Franco. Anyway,
so he decided to make a movie of Child of God, and he was asking Cormac McCarthy about the book when he was doing the movie, and he said, where did you even come up with that? And McCarthy just kind of dismissed it. He just said, oh, some dumbass place. Just whatever, James, I'm an author, I think stuff up all the time, surely you must understand that. And he just kind of brushed him off. In the background of this are some cases of a serial killer and a few other things that he seems to have been drawing on. But in this, or in No Country for Old Men, which is also incredibly violent, and it features a savage, cold-blooded killer, it is just depicted. There's no judgment attached to any of it. In a way that is actually a gentle thing to do to the reader, in that it just allows the reader to have their own opinion about it, as opposed to trying to dictate the reader's opinion. And most of us are morally aware enough to know that cold-blooded death, cold-blooded murder is bad. So we don't need somebody to tell us that.
Right.
But then it also gives him the ability to be distanced enough from it that he can just portray the action and leave you free to engage it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, another thing that really stands out to me is Lester Ballard is an outsider. And I'm curious about any commentary the book provides with respect to the outsider in society. I mean, everybody has encountered someone who's a drifter, whatever.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that?
There's a moment where he gets accused of rape, and he's innocent. He provokes the charge, so like it's understandable that what happens to him happens to him. But he's accused of rape, and they realize there's no case, and they let him go. And when they let him go, the sheriff's deputy asks him, as he's like letting him out of the jail, like, what else are you going to do next?
Yeah.
And there's almost like an expectation of Ballard that he won't behave himself. There's an expectation of Ballard that he will do wrong. Everyone around him expects it. It's just like the kid afterwards, after he beat up the child, who says, you know, I didn't want to have anything to do with him after that. Like, the community expects him to be bad. He's playing a role, unfortunately, in this community of being the bad guy. And consciously or not, he amplifies the role from one misdeed to the next.
Right.
And justifies their expectations of him from one deed to the next, to the point that, you know, if we get to this in any kind of explicit description, he commits crimes that are so off anybody's radar that they're all completely shocked when it all comes out.
Yes.
And I think he is playing into this expectation. Now, at the same time, he has obviously moral culpability. It's not just that society has said you will misbehave, therefore he's free to misbehave, or he feels justified in misbehaving or whatever. But that role of an outsider is one that is kind of given to him.
Yeah.
Like, the community does not want him.
Yes. And almost that exchange you described with the sheriff's deputy, it's almost like a challenge.
It is.
In the way the attitude is conveyed.
Yeah, such an interesting point that you bring up there. It is. Like, he's daring him.
Yeah.
Go do something worse.
Yes. And also sort of begs the question in my mind just about the nature of the scapegoat.
Yeah.
Generally throughout history, and projection of our own wrongdoing or ill thoughts, impure thoughts onto someone that can be the person that takes it for all of us, so we don't have to confront our own demons.
Wow. Yeah. I hadn't thought about it in those terms, but he is in many ways a scapegoat. That,
again, not saying he doesn't fulfill his own moral agency. But,
But I think that's a fascinating analysis, because it's not like the community is righteous.
No.
You know, they have many sins, and yet they're free because he is so bad to not have to deal with them. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a common theme throughout human experience.
Yeah, no kidding. I hadn't put it in that term, though, of thinking of the scapegoat. That's an insightful way of thinking about it.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. Let me see okay. How would you say, since we mentioned the townspeople, maybe a little bit more with respect to any complicity they might have in his downfall, any scenes in particular or exchanges that stand out to you that kind of reinforce this idea that the townsfolk may not have directly, or how would they have indirectly perhaps contributed to the circumstance? Is there anything that stands out to you in that respect?
There's no exchange between Ballard and people in the community in which the people kind of get off like they're good or decent or whatever. The closest thing is when he's buying clothes for a corpse that he has procured, and is buying some clothes for this corpse, and the woman who is selling him the clothes, she's kind of baffled by him. But she's probably the most innocent person with whom he has an exchange in the story. Everyone else has kind of hateful attitudes about him.
Yeah.
She doesn't have a hateful attitude about him. She just is kind of baffled by him.
Yeah.
And so because everyone approaches him with this kind of hateful attitude, I would think in a sense they are driving him further away, which then compounded with his own decisions and traumas ends up creating, the particular moral cocktail that, we end up getting.
Yeah. Well, and it came to my mind as you were talking. It's early in the book. Ballard approaches someone who appears to also be kind of a on the outskirts of society guy, and he asks him if he has any whiskey.
Right.
And the guy gets up to get it, and Ballard says, I can pay you in a week. And the guy sits back down.
Yeah, he's like, no,
like
I don't trust you.
There's nothing ever just out of the goodness of human to human.
Nope.
It's a transaction, or it's just a complete non-starter.
Yeah.
With Ballard and anybody in the book.
Yeah, you don't know how much of that is a reflection of McCarthy's desire to just show like this impoverished community. Everybody is kind of on the back end of the moral curve, you know, like these are all problematic people. That feels in a way too easy, you know, like I think we can expect that people at, you know, whatever their environment to have enough decency in them that they would behave decently towards others, but nobody does. Outside of, again, I think maybe the woman in the store selling him the articles of clothing for the corpse, who again doesn't seem to judge him. She's just kind of there, like baffled by him.
Right.
But everyone else, even his friends, the quote unquote friends that he has, you know, he's not liked. He's not really tolerated much. He goes to visit a friend, and his friend isn't there, and he kind of waits around and makes an ass of himself and leaves. What you realize is in that moment, like the tension of the moment with the people who were there in the family waiting, please, for their father to come home and get this guy out of here for us. You realize that that's pretty much how everyone feels about him. Everyone feels awkward around him. Yeah. No one wants to be around him.
Yeah. He's just off-putting in general.
Yeah. Like he, I don't know how to describe this, especially without sounding, you know, negative towards folks who may have issues, but it's like he just does not know how to be a person. You know, and we've all been around people like that where we're in a social setting and somebody just has no clue how to relate. And that's usually, you know, if you know that person, maybe you know that that's true about them everywhere. Sometimes it's just a case of like, I feel totally foreign in this situation. Yeah. I don't know what to do. He brings the sense of foreignness with him wherever he goes. And so you have these encounters where his kind of, it's like he's not just antisocial. First, he's asocial. He just doesn't know how to be in community with people. He doesn't know how to be a person. Right. And because of that, nobody's extending themselves trying to help him. They just keep pushing him to the margins.
Yeah. Yeah. It continually begs the question to me, the potential for someone to arrest that slide into utter depravity. Yeah. That Ballard, the continuum of events, as you described, gets darker and darker and incomprehensible, quite frankly. I mean, I've done plenty of things that were wrong in my time. Yes. I can't recall ever contemplating the things that Lester Ballard ends up doing.
Right. Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if you had that experience reading it, but something in me at each turn is like, where was the good person hiding from each other?
Right. Where was the person that helped pump the brakes? You know, something.
And what if McCarthy had just had? Well, it would have ruined the entire story, I suppose, if there had been an encounter where someone was genuinely kind to Ballard, and Ballard rebuffed them.
Right.
There would leave no room for us to reserve that space of hope for Ballard, perhaps.
Yeah, I think. That's a really insightful point. I think part of what he's doing there is he's preserving the ambiguity again, so that you can always hold some part of you that refuses to judge him because you know that all these other people had this contribution to the outcome. Yeah. Whereas if somebody had behaved in a pure way towards him, in a loving way towards him, and he rebuffed that, then it would be like, he closed his door. He closed the door, you know, to redemption. He sealed his fate. And if he sealed his fate, then what happens next would not be as morally charged as it ends up being, you know?
I wonder if, because I know you had mentioned there were a few passages that really jumped out. Would you be willing to share any particular?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me just mention one in particular.
Yeah.
This answers the question, and by answering, I mean it doesn't answer the question. Nothing answers the question.
It's a response, perhaps?
It's a response, and it's one that when you read it, you are free to have an argument with the book because it's finally like stated in black and white language. So at the very beginning, we've got that, a child of God, much like yourself, perhaps, right? Mm-hmm. And again, the perhaps is like the hinge of the entire book. So then you get down near the very end, and there's a flood that has happened, and there's people navigating around the town, trying to, help people out, trying to do things. And the sheriff's deputy picks up this old timer, and they start having a conversation in this rowboat with this old timer. And the guy says, "You think people was meaner then than they are now?" The deputy said. The old man was looking at the flooded town. "No," he said, "I don't. I think people are the same from the day God first made one." And that's a stunning statement because, and you wonder, like, okay, how much of does McCarthy believe that? Or is that just this character who believes that? If people are the same as the day God first made them, then they are by nature like Ballard. Mm-hmm. And that's a shocking thought. Mm-hmm. And I think, as a reader, and particularly as a Christian reader, I say, no, mm-hmm. people are not the same as the day God first made them. However you believe that God created humans, whether they, were specially created and, at the end of 6 days, or if, they evolved, up to some point where they became whatever humans are. However you consider that, if you think that there is like the kind of depravity that Ballard displays basic to the human kit from the beginning, it changes everything about the story. Because I think what's happening is, in a way, McCarthy assumes that that's not actually true, mm-hmm. but then he throws that into question with that perhaps.
Yeah.
And then he shows this subtle is not the word, inevitable, but by grades, descent of Ballard. And then all of that has occurred, right?
Right.
Till you get to this point where this guy says, Ballard, all of us, are just the same as we've always been. Mm-hmm. And you kind of have that moment, you have to have that moment of disagreement where mm-hmm. or rebellion even against the narrator, where mm-hmm. you're like, no, we're not. Like he had a choice. He could have done something different. The society had a choice. They could have done something different. I have a choice. I can do something different. And even if you separate it from theological questions of like salvation or things like that, mm-hmm. humans are left with some degree of moral agency that they have to exercise. And this moment calls into question the ability to do that mm-hmm. in a way that should force you to either say, I guess we've always been this rotten, or no, there's something worth fighting for in my own character or in the, in the community in which I live, to stir people towards something different than that. Mm-hmm. And the first time I read the book, that hit me like over the head, like a 2x4. And then the second time, I knew it was coming this time. Yeah. I'm like waiting for this line. Like, when does that line come again? And that hit me, and I'm like, there it is. And yes, that is the whole story. Like, and it's like, it's perfectly bookended almost, and it's like, it's right there. And it's just shocking. There are though so many moments in the book that are either meaningful or not meaningful that are memorable.
Yes.
There's a scene where a neighbor comes to talk with Ballard, and they're both squatting apart from each other, and they're described as like, there's a lot of squatting that happens in this story. So this community is impoverished enough.
There's no indoor plumbing.
No,
in this book.
There's no plumbing. There's no chairs. Apparently, people just sit and squat. And so he's squatting opposite this guy, and they're described as looking like constipated gargoyles. And you're like, you just laugh. There's a lot of impish humor in the book, and some of it is like underlinable kind of stuff like that. Other is just like situationally comic. Like there's a scene where Ballard wins at a fair these big, huge plush toys at a shooting gallery.
Yes.
Now he's described as being like a dead shot. He's got like he has one virtue, and that is that he can hit anything with a rifle.
And it's connected to being violent accurately.
Right, yeah, totally. The one thing he can do well happens to be deadly, and he uses it to deadly ends. Yeah. But in this instance, he's using it to amusing ends. He's frustrating this carnival barker who's got a booth, and if people can hit these targets, then they get the big prize, you know, and nobody can do it. But Ballard does it to the point that he gets kicked out of the carnival because he's busy like sweeping the booth.
Dragging a menagerie of
yeah.
toys.
It's like the gambler who's too effective and finally gets run out of the casino. So he wins, I think it's 3 of these big plush animals. So he leaves with like a bear and a tiger and whatever else the other one was. And
Maybe a lion.
The lion, yeah. So he's got these huge plush animals. Here's this like a serial killer walking around with these huge plush animals. And he loves these animals. He keeps them with him in this shed that he's living in out in the woods. And he saves them when the place burns down. When he leaves, he is stuck. His place burns down. Along with a treasure. I won't mention what the treasure is, but he's bereft about this treasure that burns up in this house. It's not one you would ever expect, nor one that you would ever want yourself, but he does. And this house or this shack burns down, but he saves those animals. And then he takes them with him to this cave where he ends up making his home. Like, so there's this network of caves in these hills and these mountains. And he burrows down in there and he's living underground. And it's funny because interesting, but also a little bit funny, the funny, interesting part is there's this bestial descent that he is making from a farm to a shack to a cave. And it's like he becomes more animalistic. The deeper he gets in his sin, the more like an animal he behaves and becomes. Yeah. And an icon of it, like comically, are these stuffed animals that he has, which he cherishes.
Like a wolf pack.
Yeah.
Of inanimate cuddle toys.
Yes. And the inanimate thing is an important word because that is part of the rest of the story. But there's a moment where this flood comes up and he's fleeing his cave and because it's all going to get washed out, and he's got these animals with him, and he falls in the creek where he's trying to ford, and the animals go bobbing down the creek, and he loses them. And it's like you mentioned pitiable at the beginning. Yeah. It's such a pitiful moment.
Yeah.
Like, it's comically stupid and funny because, like, here's a man running for his life, fleeing his fellow citizens who are after him for the crimes that he's committed. And he's concerned about these bobbing plush toys going down the creek. And you just see it, and it's so pathetic.
Yeah.
And you kind of just laugh, you know?
Yeah. Well, I keep, those little turns for me, and maybe it reflects something of my nature, but it again, as you say, it's pathetic, and yet it somehow humanizes.
Yeah, it is humanizing.
Yeah.
Like he cares.
Yes.
And you can imagine yourself caring.
In his twisted way.
Yeah.
These are his only friends.
Yeah.
And now they're gone.
Yep.
Yeah.
A further part of his alienation.
Right.
Because at every stage, as he becomes more animal-like, he becomes more alienized from the community.
Yeah.
And like that is in fact the final moment, because then he holds up in one last place and he is eventually rousted and arrested. And I shouldn't say that he's rousted. He's rousted by his own greed. Mm-hmm. He obsesses over the fact that his farm has been taken from him. Mm-hmm. And he regularly goes down and spies on the man that has acquired the farm through his rifle scope. Mm-hmm. And like he's just eyeing him, you know, but he's eyeing him attached to a deadly weapon. and he decides one day, I'm getting it back.
Yeah.
And he attacks the man in a comical moment. The man is saved from what would have killed him outright. Because again, Lester Ballard is a dead shot. Like, he never loses. He never misses. We've seen him shoot people in similar moments from similar distances elsewhere in the story. So we know that this guy's a goner, but he's not. And as this man is saved by fate, by accident, by whatever, his guardian angel, who knows, Ballard is put in a position where Ballard comes on the wrong side finally, and he wakes up under arrest in a hospital, and people suspect and have long suspected that he's been involved in this string of killings that has happened, and a lynch mob basically forms to take him out to the country and have him find the bodies, because they believe that he has hid the bodies. And he has, in fact, hid the bodies. Yeah. He escapes from this buffoonish group of men who think that they're going to take this wily coyote of a man and have him lead them to the bodies.
That's right.
He lives in the ground. He knows these caves. And even if he doesn't know the caves, he has more weird patience than they do. And so he and just sort of native facility and finding his way around. So he digs and finds like a cubby and gets away from these men as they're following him. These idiots, their flashlight goes out. They're like stranded underground, and he loses them. And then after he's lost them, they would have undoubtedly killed him. Had they found the bodies even, or whatever, or had he refused to show them the bodies. Yeah. He gets away. It takes days for him to come out. In fact, there's this twisted, almost Christ-like element to this story, in that I think he's underground for 3 days. Yeah. And given up for dead. And then he's resurrected. He finds a chink in the soil above him, and he comes out through the hole in the ground. He's resurrected. But he doesn't just slink off and like go on the lam. He goes and he checks himself back in at the hospital. It's a really funny and, again, pathetic moment. Like, he's done running. He has no run left in him. Mm-hmm. He just says, "I'm supposed to be here," I think is almost the dead quote of that moment. And the next thing, like, they realize he's so far out of his head. He doesn't stand trial. He's handed over to a medical institution, a mental institution. Mm-hmm. And eventually he's carved up for parts and the advancement of science at the end. Yeah. And then it all comes out. Yeah. What happens, where the bodies are literally hid, all comes out after that.
Yeah. Remarkable. You mentioned the sort of resurrection motif.
Yeah.
Would you like to touch on any particular theological concepts or imagery that is in the book?
Well, I think the main one is the one we've kind of already talked about, which is this question of, like, what does it mean to be a child of God?
Right.
And how much does this child of God reflect his creator? If you are a child of God, just like Ballard, perhaps, and Ballard has been created just like all other humans were created, bad from the beginning, what does that say about God?
Yes.
And what does that say about the hope for people? If you buy that, there is no hope.
Right.
And the kind of resurrection you can expect to have would be no more glorious than the one Ballard had, which is to say, to the light of day, back to the mental institution. Like, it's just a circle of insanity that we're stuck in.
Yeah.
And, I hope for something much different than that.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed. I'm curious about that phrase, as you say, those bookends, and I really appreciate it because I'm certain I read that comment in the rowboat, but it didn't captivate me like it has you. And just notions of total depravity, original sin, these are concepts that were interwoven throughout my own upbringing,
Mm-hmm.
and many American Christian, particularly Protestant,
Yep.
but Catholic as well, and,
Sure.
and Orthodox. Just the notion of what is the residue. Residue is probably not the right word, because if you believe in the Imago Dei, the image of God that we are created in, as you describe Athanasius with that defaced icon, yet there's something still there. It's it must be retrieved. It is, for me, it is impossible to accept the idea of total depravity.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, what does it say about God?
Yeah, I'm with you on that point. I think I have come over the course of my life from having believed in total depravity in a sort of classic Protestant frame to the kind of Eastern Christian Orthodox view that man is not utterly, totally fallen, that he's fallen. There is something deeply broken in humanity. There is something marred in that image, but that image can be restored. And God is at work constantly in creation, attempting to restore that image, working to restore that image, and not working simply through his own means, but through the means of the church, through the means of the example of the saints and others in our own lives who call us to something better. There are many, countless, in a sense, means of grace that God is at work using. And in the case of Ballard, you see almost every possible version of those means, like not used to the end that they could have been. And so, he's bereft, but not totally.
Right.
There's enough in him where you expect something better from him. Otherwise, you wouldn't be outraged at his actions.
Right.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be kind of in a moral bind with the questions that he raises in the novel. Like, how much am I like that? A child of God, much like yourself, perhaps. The perhaps holds like all of the questions, all of the drama, all of the everything, and that one word that's all sitting in there asking for you to answer the question, am I like that? And why, and because, how, and on and on and on, all of the different related parts of that. It's a deep question.
And I think the reason, because I have, my wife in particular, this type of content she will have nothing to do with.
Same with mine.
And probably the majority of the general public. There's something in me that's like almost a challenge to my own conviction regarding the ability for anyone to be redeemed, to explore this level of depravity. And can I walk away from this encounter and still think, I do believe that Lester Ballard could have, even
absolutely,
to its end, have been restored.
Had the right person been there, as you pointed out, if somebody had been there to kind of break the fall, if somebody had been there to kind of act in a way towards him where they could have intervened in some meaningful way, I believe that he would have potentially not gone as far as he did. I also believe that there's no reason why in all those years in the mental institution that something couldn't have happened to him there either, or whatever. At the same time, the clock does run out, in some sense, on our lives. And I don't know ultimately what happens there. I believe that there is, in a sense, a judgment, and, but what God does in that judgment is for him to determine, and how God weighs the human heart is for him to determine. And so I don't want to ever, in my own mind, close the door on anybody. So even a fictional character like Ballard, I would say, yes, there's a hope for him.
And I would say, reflecting personally, there's a bit of an admonition in my own conscience to consider the encounters I've had with people on the fringes or the margins. And how often, like, what might have been if I spent more time,
Right.
if I was even more generous,
Right.
anyway, that's an endless sort of
Totally.
exposition, but yeah.
Well, there's that line, I don't know who said it first. It's been regurgitated many, many times by many people since, that you should be kind to everyone you encounter because everyone is fighting a great battle.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really true. Like, I don't know what you're going through right now.
Yeah.
You don't know what I'm going through right now, other than whatever it is we share. But most of the things that we encounter with people, they're not telling you everything in their life. And when you run into somebody, who's literally on the margins of society, the guy selling the contributor newspaper down on the corner for $1 or $2 or whatever they are right now, just hoping that you'll, add something to his day.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can guess at all the stuff that he's ever been through, but you don't know. You don't have any clue. And yet he is a child of God, much like you, perhaps.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. That's a bit of an anecdote, but you brought that up. There's a gentleman who does the same in the Seattle area.
Yeah.
And I often forget
Mm-hmm.
to have cash.
Yeah.
But when I do, I always give him far more than the papers
Right.
cost.
Yeah.
And part of me recalls my own, younger days with nothing, no money, figuring it out. And anyway, it's good. Okay. What is the significance of this book? Is there any?
We've touched on it, I think, all throughout, in that the book is asking you to kind of grapple with your own humanity, and not just the parts of your humanity that you like to grapple with, the fun parts, the good parts, the cute parts, the inventive parts. We all like to think about our creativity and, our moral uprightness and, the way we're better than other people and all that. But this book flatly makes you confront the parts that are not like that, almost cartoonishly and grotesquely, so you're really left with no cover.
Yeah.
There's no fig leaf after reading this book.
Yeah.
You're just there, like wrestling with your humanity, puzzled by it to a degree.
Yeah. What do you think just overall McCarthy's legacy might be?
He does a version of that in all the books of his that I've read. He plays around with religious themes or theological themes. He was raised Catholic, and I believe rejected that somewhere in his life. He liked to hang out with scientists a lot. He did not like hanging out with authors. Literary culture did not appeal to him, and he was famously reclusive, but he did like to hang out and had an office at the Santa Fe Institute in New Mexico, which is an interdisciplinary institute that deals with physics, biology, all of these kind of like scientific disciplines together, economics, a lot of different linguistics, a lot of different practices and disciplines converge there. And McCarthy worked out of that place on his typewriter for decades, helping scientists copy edit papers, doing all kinds of weird stuff.
Interesting.
He was really interested in like these foundational questions about our daily existence, and the sciences are kind of where he wanted to explore that. But in his novels, he gives us like the theological versions of those questions, and they're accidentally theological. They're not directly theological, but they're deep theological questions in pretty much every one of his books, I think. Yeah. Some of them, they come down to like fate or questions of God's providence and or the lack thereof. There's a moment in All the Pretty Horses where the two main characters are sitting, I think, at one of their many camps one night, and he asks them, John Grady asks if God looks out for us, and the other character says, like, just look at how messed up the world is. There's war and ruination and all kind of terrible things. If God didn't look out for us, I don't think we'd make it a day, without that.
Interesting twist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's another line that McCarthy says in, I don't remember which novel this is now. I think it might be, I'm not going to hazard a guess, but where he says, you never know what bad thing your bad luck has saved you from.
Yes. Yes.
And that's like,
I think it's No Country for Old Men.
I think you're right. That is No Country for Old Men. Okay. That's like a really insightful thing. Like, we encounter the world as brutal and bad as it is, and sort of like judge God or miffed at God for allowing it to be the way that it is, forgetting that it could always be worse.
Right.
And it's his sustaining mercy that prevents it from being worse. The fact that the townspeople in this novel are actually a cartoonish reflection of how bad people can be and how selfish people can be. The reality is, Lester Ballard ends up in a community. There would have been people there to be kind to him, regardless of how bad he was, And we know that because that's our daily experience. As I was coming up the elevator here, I was met by a man who asked me, what floor I was on. I didn't know. I suddenly realized I don't know what suite I'm in. I found it, but up until that moment, he was busy trying to help me.
Yeah.
He doesn't know me, and it's not really his job, as far as I could tell. He looked like a janitor. So he's just there being helpful. Yeah. There are people out there everywhere just being helpful, reflecting the image of God that's in them to the image of God that's in us, trying to help us along, whether they're doing it for who knows what reason. But humanity is like that. It's not all bad all the time. And because it's not all bad all the time, we can be grateful that God has done what he's done in the world. And I think that that's a humbling and inspiring, frankly, thought. Yeah. The world isn't what it is in Child of God.
Yeah. And we are all children of God.
Right.
No perhaps.
No perhaps. Yeah.
Thanks, Joel Miller.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This has been a fantastic conversation.
Yeah, really appreciate it.
Joining me today, as you've already discovered, is Joel Miller, but I thought I'd share a little bit of his biography with you. Joel Miller is a former publishing executive with 20-year career in writing and editorial work. Today he serves as Chief Content Officer of Full Focus, found at fullfocus.co, and he publishes Miller's Book Review, millersbookreview.com, a popular Substack celebrating literary culture. He is the author of several books, including The Idea Machine, How Books Built Our World and Shape Our Future, forthcoming November of this year. His writing has appeared in Reason Magazine, The Washington Post, American Spectator, and National Review. He lives outside Nashville, Tennessee, with his wife, kids, dogs, and more books than space. I am so thankful that Joel was willing to take the plunge. Today's episode of The Plunge is sponsored by a very brief excerpt from Cormac McCarthy's novel, The Road. "Listen to me," he said. "When your dreams are of some world that never was, or some world that never will be, and you're happy again, then you'll have given up. Do you understand? And you can't give up. I won't let you."